I want to add that since I arrived to Sweden in April 2022, I noticed how good Swedish people are in overcoming conflicts, finding common ground, and actually being united in the face of anything. And I kept asking, how do you manage to do that? And every time I got the very same answer, because we are a very small country and we need to stick together. Now the moment is that the whole world is a very small world, and everything that happens in one part of this world affects all the other countries and other parts. So I believe this is the perfect moment for us all to stick together. It's not just about Ukraine anymore, it's about all of us. So it's good to find common ground in all the ways we can. And I want to notify you that this year's Ukraine Vision will be broadcasted live and recorded, so no pressure at all, just do your best. We believe in you, we believe in us, we believe in everyone who is here and who is supporting. Thank you so much.
So let's begin. Welcome to Ukraine Vision 2025. And we welcome our first panel discussion, Intersections of Memories and Identity. Memory defines who we are, both as individuals and as nations. It shapes the way we see history and identity and our collective future. Today, our panelists will explore how Ukrainian society preserves memory, processes historical trauma, and redefines identity in times of war and challenge. Moderator is Yuliia Yurchuk, panelists Yuliya Hnat, Annika Hirvonen, Niklas Cserhalmi, and Elisabeth Millqvist. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming. Thank you for our panelists. Thank you for the audience. It's great to see you here. And this day is truly memorable because 11 years ago, 2014, it was the most massive shooting on Maidan. And we truly thought that this is the end, right? But history can be very unpredictable. Yanukovych left the country and Ukraine had the chance for the fight for the freedom for 11 years more. So I think that we shouldn't be very pessimistic, and I believe in us, I believe in democracy, and I believe in the goodwill of good people. So I think that I won't take too much time because we have such distinguished guests. So I will just present you all and then I will have my questions to you. We'll start with Yuliya Hnat. She is the Ecosystem Projects and Development Director and co-founder of NGO Museum of Contemporary Art. It's called MOCA NGO, which includes sub-entities of the Ukrainian Museum of Contemporary Art. It's called UMCA in Ukrainian. It's very nice. And the Ukrainian Emergency Art Fund, I won't pronounce this short name. Hnat co-curates the post-war memory culture in Ukraine and works as an expert on memory and identity issues at RESPOL. She leads the Art Sanct initiative, coordinates efforts between Ukrainian state institutions, the art scene, and international partners. With extensive experience in cultural institutions, she previously held leadership roles at the Ukrainian Institute and at the National Art Museum of Ukraine. Welcome. Then we have Annika Hirvonen. She is a Swedish politician from the Green Party. She has been a member of parliament since 2014, and she holds the position of group leader of her party group. She has worked in several committees, including Committee for Justice, the Committee on Education, and the Committee on Taxes. She is also a spokesperson on migration. Before entering parliament, she was the chair of the local committee of culture and sports. With her ancestry in Finland, Annika comes from a family that was very much marked by Russia's war with Finland, and she is determined that Sweden should continue supporting Ukraine for as long as need be. Thank you, Annika. And then we have Elisabeth Millqvist, who is the director of Moderna Museum Malmö, division of Moderna Museet funded by the city of Malmö, region Skåne, and the Swedish government. With over a decade of experience as part of the leadership duo and artistic director of the renowned sculpture park Vanås Konst, she has dedicated her career to contemporary art. Millqvist is particularly known for her close collaborations with artists, often focusing on site-specific works. Her strong commitment to art education underscores her mission to create an engaging museum with strengths connecting between people, objects, and ideas. And currently, what is very important for Ukrainians, she was curating the exhibition The Fantastic and Horrific, Maria Primachenko, and works from the Moderna Museet collection. And Niklas Cserhalmi, who is a Swedish agrarian historian, so my colleague, I'm also historian, but I'm historian of ideas, you agrarian historian, and a museum professional. He earned his PhD in 2004 at Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences with dissertation on animal welfare, which is very interesting. Niklas has worked at the National Heritage Board, been employed by the Swedish Local Heritage Federation, and served as a lecturer at Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. From 2005 to 2011, he was the Deputy Museum Director and Head of Mediation at the Museum of Work in Norrköping. I really love this museum, I should say. And since May 2011, he has been the director of the same museum. So welcome all, and we'll start with the general question to all of you, and this is something what I also as a professional am very interested, how you see and how you understand the connection between memory and identity in your work. When you work, and we all now heard where you work and with which material, so to say, but how you understand this connection and how you maybe use these concepts in your work. Yeah, we can start with you, Yuliya.
Yeah, thank you, Yuliya, and thank you for you gave a short introduction. And I will start maybe from the actual identity of our organization, because it is very representative in answering the question. I would describe our NGO as like a threefold identity, through like a museum, like a fund, and like a think tank. And why we are doing this? Because we have, we engaging contemporary art professionals who work in Ukraine and abroad, and trying to deal with our challenges now in our art ecosystem. And we haven't actually a museum institution which is working properly with this part of our heritage of our past, and there are 30 years, and there are a lot of discussions about this institution, but it wasn't established yet. But that is why we are working as NGO, and we are developing approaches, and now we are acquiring collection, because this our newest heritage of our difficult time is appearing and disappearing, because a lot of artists creating their artworks, and they are selling this to support army, and that is why our NGO established the Wartime Art Archive, and we have it's a curatorial observation and now we are publishing this as an archive, like a database with interviews of artists, and there are more than 15,000 of artworks in this archive, but part of this archive is already published and part is in process, and we are working with this material, but at the same time we are representing this to our community, to our society, to have this common experience, shared experience through these artworks, to have this discussion, to discuss our memories about this experience, and we are observing now the trend that in our society the distance between art field and wider audience is cutting. Yeah, is getting smaller, and we had a large exhibition in 2023 with about 100 artists. Their artworks were represented there in Ukraine and Kiev, and we had a study there. Neurophysiologists they held the study, and people, visitors who came to this exhibition, they there was like eye tracking and the feeling researching, and about the perception of art and their and their feeling before and after the visit in the exhibition, and we see the influencing of this this representing of these works about this war experience and the discussion and with people, and our professionals say that this is the new type of interaction between people and artistic practices, and there are a lot of directions to talk about this project and the findings from that, but I just want to describe some directions. And now, of course, we together with our partners in 2022 we started our common efforts together in the field of memory culture, and through engaging artistic practices and through educational programs, so the development of educational programs, because there are a lot of initiatives on memorialization, and local communities and different groups, they want to create monuments, memorials, but they use the same practices of memorialization as it was used in Soviet times, and we have this challenge to develop new language to work with all these issues and initiatives, and we are in time of development of these new practices of memorialization, of working with past, more inclusive, not through exclusive model as it was in Soviet time. And now, of course, we are looking on approaches from our colleagues in different regions of world, but at the same time we are in current situation, and it's a feeling when we are in plane and trying to change, to reconstruct this plane during the flight. And of course there are a lot of issues, but also I will describe one more project. It's important, RESPOL, Rapid Expert Support for Ministry of Culture, when a group of experts working on issues in cultural field, and particularly in cultural heritage field. Me and my colleagues working in this group of experts, and we look into questions of memory and identity through the lens of cultural heritage, because we have a lot of museum collections, a lot of museums in Ukraine, a lot of archives, libraries, etc. But there are problems of working with collections in approaches, in methodologies, and in access to these collections, actually, because there are practices of working in museums when people and professionals have lack of access to these collections, actually, because there are huge. We defined 15 key policy issues in these questions, and now working. But the root problem, as we defined, is that cultural heritage and cultural field is not considered as a matter of national security, but it should. Because we are in a war on a cultural basis, actually.
Thank you. I think we will come back to some of these questions you mentioned, but we will continue now with Annika.
Yes. I think it's very inspiring hearing about your project, and I feel the urge. Do you also feel it, like you want to go and you want to see this? You want to go to the gallery and be part of it. Yeah. So, as a politician, I have been working on identity and memories in different ways. In Sweden, the last couple of decades, Sweden has been dealing with the history of its national minorities. And first of all, writing down these histories. The Swedish government committed very serious violations toward its minority people in the past, and having truth commissions going through and putting that history into writing has been very important. And also working on the minorities' languages and cultures to be revived that were for many decades an issue where the Swedish policy was that children should speak Swedish in school, not their minority languages. Now Sweden is in a process of trying to reverse that sort of killing of language that had been going on. And me, as a member of the Finnish minority in Sweden, I am working also in my private life, preserving the identity also forward to my children. And in my understanding, language is a very central part of any person's identity. And therefore, I have been following particularly the struggle of Ukrainian people, both in Ukraine, but also abroad, to strengthen and hold on to the Ukrainian language. Here in Sweden, many initiatives have been taken to make sure that Ukrainian children that came here as refugees can have books in their own language. I think this is very important, and I agree with you that the war now, Russia's war on Ukraine, is not just a war about territories, it's also a war about identity and culture. And one of the grossest acts of violation of international law is the abduction of children, Ukrainian children that have been abducted. And I understand it partly as an effort to change, the identity of the people of Ukraine, to rescript in these children very hands-on a different identity than that they were born with and born to have. I think it's important for us as friends of Ukraine to not only, as we are doing now from Sweden, strengthening our support to the military effort and defense of Ukraine, but also to stand up for the Ukrainian identity and culture, making sure that this is being preserved and also allowed to develop. I think I will maybe move a bit. You also asked us about how the situation, if we've changed the perception of identity and memories when this war came to be. I think one thing for me has stood out when you think about Memorial in Russia that received the Nobel Peace Prize. They are working on memories, and they have been very much prosecuted for this. Why? Because memories are very, very powerful. Knowing about history is very powerful. Knowing about the crimes that have been committed, it gives you knowledge to also see what might come in the future. And we all have a responsibility now, as the war is going on, to make sure that the memories of what is happening now is preserved, so that in the future justice can be made for these crimes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Elisabeth.
So I think it's when you have this partly focus on language, it makes me think of, so I focus on the visual arts, another part of culture, and I would say that identity and memory is at the core of what artists work with in making art. And this is the starting point, and this is so in my work what I feel I very much deal with, reflecting upon that work with identity, but also from a viewer's perspective or participant of an artwork. Then the artwork can be the resource to connect, because you feel familiar, you feel this story talks to you, do you feel this image talk to you, but also as a common denominator across differences. So it can have both those capacities. Memory and identity is at the core of art, and in this example that you mentioned, that right now if you go to Malmö until the 30th of March, there is an exhibition with more than 40 works by Maria Primachenko. So how can you see memory and identity as part of her artworks? I would say absolutely. If she would have been living her life in another region than Policia region, then I think the artworks would have looked different. And this is also why art can become so emblematic in building identity. So we want to visualize what does our identity look like, and then we come back to what you mentioned on the destruction. So unfortunately, we constantly rewrite art history, and we need to change it and say this doesn't work anymore. Those thoughts, this is not for our time, but then there is the deliberate destruction by the conqueror, and that is about, well, you hit artwork, but you're trying to actually target people's memory and identity through erasing it. So I think it resonates very strongly.
Thank you. And Niklas?
Yeah, I think you're putting it very well, all of you. And I would say that memory, of course, as you all say, creates identity, both in a personal view, my memories creates who I am today, but also on a societal level, of course. What memories we have as a nation, as a heritage, forms the nation. And that is why, as Annika puts it, it's so important for an aggressor to radiate that memory. If an aggressor can radiate our heritage and our memory, we will of course start to lose our identity, and the identity is quite important for our struggle and to be able to withstand and continue to struggle. So the ones who controls the memory also kind of controls the identity. And I think that today we have seen, or yesterday, when Donald Trump had his completely mad sayings about Zelensky and who started the war, the memory part there is so important because we all remember, we all know who started the war. We all know who is the elected president of Ukraine. And that memory can also resist that kind of manipulative propaganda that comes out from Russia right now and has so unfortunately landed in the worst place it could ever land, in the presidency of the United States. So memory is so important in creating identity and creating strength, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you. And I have one question for all of you about what Annika already mentioned about how your understanding of memory and identity changed. And maybe we can change the order, because I think that all of you touched upon this a bit, but I still think that we have something to add to this, because I think that in Sweden it's particularly interesting to see how your perception changed, because the war is not here, so to say, right? And of course for Yuliia it's quite another story, because the war is in her country, and still you all have your own understanding of memory and identity and how this understanding changed during the war. And I guess that maybe even time difference will be different here, because for Yuliia I think everything changed 2014, and in Sweden I would say I live in Sweden for 16 years, and I can see that people reacted in 2022 with much more interest, so to say, than in 2014. So what is your take on this? Maybe we can start with Niklas here.
Yeah, it's a huge question, and I must say that my relation to memory and identity completely transferred when the war started. It was such a shock, and my whole view on memory and identity and what could be described as nationalism completely changed. Mm-hmm. I've grown up in a world where nationalism for me has always been a very nasty, ugly thing. And of course, nationalism is what drives the aggressor. It's what drives Russia to attack Ukraine. But in Ukraine's struggle, I would say that memory, identity / nationalism gets a new kind of role, and nationalism becomes a much more complex idea. And coming from a point where nationalism, I have always seen nationalism as something brute and ugly. I understand that culture and heritage can be part of a nationalistic force too, and correct if you use that force in a proper way. It's of course very important for your country, and nationalism is this kind of metaphysicist idea that doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a nation. It's just an idea. And it's always much more important that the individuals in that country has a good life than that the idea of the nation has a good life. But after the aggression, my life as a single citizen and my possibility to live a good life is suddenly connected to the idea of the nation. Mm-hmm. And then nationalism gets a new kind of meaning for me. And if you asked me 10 years ago, I would say that nationalism is always ugly. But if you ask me today, I would say, it's an interesting question. And it also makes it kind of different for a culture heritage institution as a museum to be part of this, because I don't really want to lend my efforts to nationalistic behavior in one way, but on the other hand, I can see that it's an important contribution to resistance. So it really transformed my way of thinking of memory.
I think this is a very important thing, because this idea of nationalism can be used by different forces, right? And even now what we see in Trump's actions, it also feeds on nationalism, because this idea of America first, this is very nationalistic in a way, but it's like reactivation of this idea is very different in different contexts, of course. Thank you, Elisabeth.
Thank you, Niklas, for being so clear and complex at the same time, and I can relate very much to what you say, and I think the war changed everything, and I think wars do change everything, and I think we can allow ourselves to think beyond borders and the nation state when we're not threatened. And because the right to self-determination becomes fundamental when we are threatened. So I think it means things such as, and this is very familiar to many of you on a personal level, I think what does war change? It changes also who can you imagine to talk to? Who can you imagine to relate to? Who can you imagine to meet at all? So I think this is, yes, the short answer is it changes everything.
Yeah, and this phrase you used, that this going beyond borders is a privilege, I really think and feel like this. Even now, when we sit here, it's a privilege. We are crossing these borders, and we are still having this conversation, right? And this is a privilege which not everyone has. Thank you. Yeah, Annika, your take on this. Maybe you wanted to add something, because you started already speaking about it.
Well, on the day of the full-scale invasion, I was actually here on the Sergelstorg, just outside. We were going to have a demonstration about women's rights to equal pay. I was going to give a speech, and then everything was changed. None of us thought that this was a good plan anymore. So we spontaneously went from Sergelstorg and to Norra Bantorget. And the first group of people that we met were people that had their origins in Russia. They were also going to protest the war. And on our way to that demonstration, we were all in shock. And I was thinking about that when you said we're talking about nationalism and crossing borders. I think nationalism, of course, has a very central role when it comes to protecting your nation. But we also see that what Ukraine is fighting for is not just to be their own nation. It's also to be a nation that can choose to be a part of Europe. It's also a nation that wants to choose to have human rights and freedoms for its people. So I think it's very complex and interesting, and I think that being able to solidarize with the people of Ukraine is something universally human for people of different nations, and we have seen that happen. I think that being from a country that has been into war is a huge mark on identity. And that kind of memory is very defining of a people. In Sweden, that hasn't been to war for more than 200 years, the full-scale invasion really came as a shock to a lot of people. At the same time, I can say that for the people that I know in Finland, they have never let down their guards. For generations, there has been no war, but every family is still marked by the war when, at that time, the Soviet Union, but I choose to say Russia because the aggressor came from Moscow, that time as well, was attacking. And a war doesn't go out of a family for generations. We can still feel the consequences in our family. Because war doesn't just destroy buildings and bridges and art, it destroys people also. And those people that are being destroyed in the front lines come home to their wives and to their children. And when a whole nation is marked by that kind of trauma, I don't know if anyone has a cure that can heal that kind of scars. So I think we need to also understand that this will have such long-term effect on the Ukrainian identity and people, both in, I think, a huge pride that Ukraine for 3 years has kept Kiev free, has withstood one of the largest aggressors that we have in the world, a huge pride in its own capability and strength, but of course also huge wounds.
Thank you, and I think maybe memory can be a sort of cure because it will also define how these scars will be healed or not. Because if the nation or the community is not allowed to remember, these scars go deeper and deeper, and I really hope that it will be not the case for Ukraine, but it also depends on how the war will end, of course.
Yeah.
So that is why this question of memory, it's not really only about some narratives, it's about people's lives and the chance for cure. And you were talking about justice, it's also about justice, and we will come back to this because I think this is a very important question. And I must just mention it to those of you who are not from Stockholm, that in Stockholm only there are 3 different protests every week for Ukraine, and it's started from 2022. So Sweden really supports Ukraine, and I think that Sweden and Swedish people are among the most supportive in Europe. So thank you very much for this separately. And as Ukrainian, I'm really thankful for this.
Can I just add one thing there? I think also I think we should acknowledge that also relating to memory and war, that why war changes everything is also because some memories will never happen.
Yeah.
Because war puts full stop on lives.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's also what is not happening.
Yeah, and maybe that is what can be preserved in art, because art is imagination in a way, and we can put the lives which didn't happen into art in a way. Yeah, Yuliya, please.
And I want to add that in our experience now we have the actualization of this connections between 3 things, yeah, states, mind states or feelings, this affective sphere, ideas, between the second level, like concepts of this implementation of this, or articulation of these ideas, and actually objects or objective sphere, like artifacts and evidences of these concepts and ideas and these states. And in this situation of a lot of lies, post-truths and these things, we have now this actualization of these connections between these levels of our reality, like ideas, concepts and things, which are like implementation of these concepts. That is why we are trying to think about heritage, about artworks, about objects we have, about the projects, what kind of ideas and concepts these projects are implements, and this is huge process we have now with different experience inside Ukraine also, because we have museums which are relocated because they are from, for example, Mariupol Local History Museum. We are cooperating now on digitalization of their collections, but the team is in different cities, but this museum hasn't the spot to work, but they work on as museum. We have Odessa Art Museum, which is under attacks, and they have some distractions. We have museums on western part of Ukraine, in Kiev, and this is a very different experience and working practices, but this is the whole process of reflecting and mobilizing how war influences us, because we should to be mobilized to protect our identity, but at the same time we should reflect on our identity. And this is the good question. This is the challenge. But it's horrible, but at the same time very interesting process. I have right to say this. And I'm proud of our people that we are trying to deal with this process and to share our knowledge about this, all of this with our colleagues, partners outside Ukraine. And so this is the challenge, because when we say about memorialization and memory projects, it looks like we should choose between different approaches from first part of 20th century. I mean, when memorials, it was like a glorification of some things, but at the same time, after Second World War, memorials were like for reflection and for working with difficult things of this experience, horrible things, and but at this moment it looks like we should balance these things, because we need mobilization resource to protect ourselves. At the same time, we should keep our human kind things and reflect on this experience. This for me, it's like the biggest challenge and the influence of this war.
And maybe this is connected to what you mentioned about the new language of memory,
of course.
Because this is the question how you balance this glorifying narrative with the more like victimizing narrative, and also traumatic narrative of war. And maybe just a couple of words about the challenges, because you already mentioned some challenges like disinformation, because I think this is even the challenge to this part of the world where we don't have war yet. But still, this is a challenge, because these cyber attacks, the information war is real. So what other challenges you see, and how you work with these challenges in your everyday work and in your thinking about memories and identities today? Maybe we will start with Elisabeth, and we will change the order a bit, just to have dynamics here.
So the challenges because of the war.
I would
related
say
to memory and identity. Well, I think one. Well, let's see what level to think about this on. But I think I it's important to keep on doing things. It's I think it's a very big feeling of, oh, is this wrong? How will this be perceived? Was this the right person, the right content? How did this work? So I think from working with exhibitions in Sweden, I believe we need to also try to do and make mistakes and correct them and realize them in dialogue rather than being too worried to do anything at all. And it's also part of any historical field, I would say, that you rewrite. And so art history is a constant rewriting. There are many people, and there's the Ukrainian art historian Oksana Semenik, for example, that constantly writes museums and tell them you should relabel where this person is from. And we will make mistakes, and I ask people that feel this that it's very personal to them to talk out loud and also be patient, and we continue to do. I think this is how we can tackle some of the difficulties in rewriting.
This is inspiring. They are making mistakes, but
Yes.
still doing it.
Yes.
Thank you. Niklas, you next.
Yeah, I'd like to connect to what Annika and Yuliya says about memories as a way of healing. I think you can see that both as on an individual level, that memories are therapeutical for you as a person, but also for society. So, like the Museum of Work where I live, where I work, sorry, we are working with industrial heritage. It's a completely different scale, but in the same way that Ukraine having a loss of their identity and their future, the industrial heritage movement in Sweden has a loss of their future on a completely different scale, more economical and not so drastic. But then you can see that there was a huge movement in the 1970s and 1980s where industries started to fall down and go to bankruptcy. There was a huge movement where people started to engage in their own industrial heritage and creating. Now we have a register on 1,500 of these small volunteer-driven museums in all Sweden connected to industrial heritage and a glorious past. What have been heard about Russia and the new aggression, you could say that there's a lack of a truth commission after the Soviet era, after the communist era. Russia didn't do any deeply truth commissions. You mentioned Memorial, for example, which is strongly worked against the mass graves from the Stalin period and such things. And we used to look at Germany and say that they had done their work really very well done. And now they started to have a problem again. But the truth commissions that were going on in Germany has had a great impact. And I guess that when this horrible war is over, the museum sector and the heritage sector has an important role in forming the identity of Ukraine, because memories can also be used therapeutical and healing, as we have seen. But in the Balkan Wars in the 90s, memories and heritage was used for constructing a war and establishing a war in a very aggressive way. So heritage and memories can really be used in both ways, as nationalism also can be used as a way for an aggressor, but also as a way of a defender. I would like to say something about the disinformation, but I can take that later.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Then we will take Yuliya and then Annika. Do you want to add something on the challenges and how you cope on it? Because you mentioned
a lot of challenges.
You mentioned what I find very fascinating: this local cooperation with the museums which are from occupied territories, and also how you digitize the collections.
It's interesting because as I started from the description of our mission as an organization and about the art ecosystem and this need to deal with the systematic problems in Ukraine, and digitalization of museum collections is like a huge challenge for all this museum system, because there are a lot of deep reasons why museums didn't make their job previously. Some did, some didn't, but it's also the reason from Soviet times, because museum teams in Ukraine, they try to have this hidden agenda. I would say because there was like official assignments. Assignments, like official assignments, how museums should work with this stuff, with collections, with programs, etc. At the same time, they have special funds. They had the part of their collections which was they should, for example, destroyed, but they didn't do this, and this paradigm of keeping something to protect it, but means at the same time not to spread the knowledge about this, and that is why the root reason. Core reason why a lot of why we have lack of information about collections, because from that thing. At the same time, it's not about the technology lacks. I would say it's about another paradigm of working of museums. And now it's changing, and. Now we put all our efforts of different actors in this system, state authorities, Ministry of Culture, museums, teams, our partners from international scene, I would say some technology companies who help us to make our job much faster. And for example, now we are working on how to develop the tools to make transferring the data from inventory books of photocopies of inventory books of our museums into a database which can be processed and in different ways about collections, and how we can develop this tool to make this whole collections accessible very fast. We now this kind of cooperation between different players, and now we have first museums we are collaborating with. It's museums from occupied and occupied territories, because we need to share the data about lost objects, about stolen objects as soon as possible, and to have this conversation and cooperation with our partners outside Ukraine based on very confident data, based on provenance things, etc. So it's like one of our cooperation, and now the digitalization, it's like a very spread process in Ukraine.
And you are taking part in this art history rewriting in a way, and writing. This is interesting.
Yes, because when we are taking the information from inventory books, which were written in Soviet times, for example. Yeah, it's we are making the visible the things which are written there, and it's challenging for museum workers to rethink about this stuff, to look at this, to problematize the way of descriptions, the way of interpretation, and that is why I started from the project of Respol, because we look at these things through the cultural heritage, through the collections, because it's important to have to protect objects to make it possible for our next generations to reinterpret this and to make this process as a long life process.
Yeah, thank you. And Annika, for me this is interesting how you as a politician see these challenges and what you as a politician can do against these challenges or facing these challenges.
I think we are learning a lot from what you are doing now in Ukraine. When we are talking about strengthening our own capacity, what we're talking about the defense of the entire society, for instance, protection of the cultural heritage is one part that wasn't very much developed, I think, before. I don't know if you, from the world of the museums, already maybe you had more ideas, but I think on a societal level, this is one of the issues that we have noticed from what Ukraine is doing. There are other things as well when it comes to the capacity to rebuild infrastructure, etc., that Ukraine has been really strong at, that were not necessarily as well developed parts in Sweden. So I think this is really an important process, and also having cooperations. Of course, the immediate purpose is now to strengthen Ukraine. I just came from a seminar in the Swedish parliament where we had a Ukrainian ambassador and also a reporter that was on the ground. She had been several times during the war on the front lines. And what she said was that we learn also so much from being there, if it comes to how to develop different military weapon systems, but I think also cooperations between museums, very hands-on. It also, when supporting, it also builds a huge knowledge that hopefully will never need to be used in Sweden. Hopefully we will never have use of knowledge about how to protect art from a war, but we really need to strengthen this.
In all levels of understanding, what does it mean to protect? Like in objects, like concentration of ideas, and make it possible to think about through different aspects. It's interesting. It's interesting to discuss about the word protection, because we now, when we with colleagues with the ministry working on the strategy of development of culture, there is a discussion: should we use development or should we use protection now? And so it's interesting because the protection, it's impossible without development, because and vice versa, because how we can develop something if we are not protecting this. And it's interesting to think about this balance and this dynamic between these aspects and instruments and ways and approaches.
Really protect the development of
Yeah, to combine these two. But I also like how you said that it's strengthening and also learning. So it's helping and learning, and this kind of cooperation is never one-sided.
No.
Thank you. And I am just looking at our clock here, and we have about 15 minutes, and I have some questions to you individually. But first, I wanted to ask our audience, if they want to ask you something, I will prioritize them. If not, then I will put all my questions together, but you all will get one long question from me. But first, let's see whether we have some questions. No? Then
We have mics, so you should have questions.
but we can go with my questions and then see. But
Could I just return to the disinformation?
yes,
Yeah?
sure.
Because I think it was also from the perspective, what are you doing as a museum? And I think that it was so interesting what President Zelensky said about Trump and his living in this disinformation bubble. And I think that the threat that comes from disinformation is one of the most grave threats that we have seen, and it happens to be that museums are the organization in the society that has the largest trustworthiness, in Sweden at least, among citizens. So when we do these huge surveys on what kind of institution do you trust in mostly, then the museums have the highest, above the police and above the healthcare, and way above the political parties and stuff like that. So I would say that we have an obligation to use that trustworthiness in trying to fight the disinformation campaigns. I was having a meeting with the general director of the psychological defense in Sweden, and he was referring to what J.D. Vance had been saying about the couple Zelensky that had been using the billions donated from America and Europe to buy yachts in the Mediterranean, which is a completely stupid, idiotic things to say. And information campaign like that costs like $150 ends up with stopping a panzer brigade of entering Ukraine. So instead of you can invest a lot of money in trying to protect Ukraine, and these kind of things are extremely expensive, and you can totally ruin that by a disinformation campaign for $150. So in fighting disinformation is one of the things that we as a museum, we don't have an obligation to do it, but it's an important role for us. So the Museum MOCA are now trying to get the parts of the working market in Sweden together, both the employers and the employees, and the psychological defense, and try to create a hub where we can be allowed to get out to workplaces with exhibitions about disinformation and trying to give tools that will help people to build their view on the world on facts and not building it on others' agendas. So I brought this wonderful pamphlet. We are using one of the most popular children books characters, Bamse. And this is the Bamse's source trackers. So we are using Bamse to talk with these things with kids, but it's almost more important to reach the adults. And we really can use Bamse in reaching the kids, but it's a bit more difficult to reach the adults. But we are really working on that. And I guess that the Ukrainian museums also have this trustworthiness that can be used in the future to heal the country, but also to resist disinformation campaigns.
Yeah, and only yesterday the most searchable phrase in the US was "Who started the war?" So you see how this campaign works, really. So it's very dangerous, and we have to approach it.
May I add one thing? When I mentioned our project, the Wartime Archive, it is published now in this way that then we have artworks in chronological way, and at the same time we have timeline of these events during the war, and some visitors of this website can see the events and what it was, who started the war, and at the same time we can see the artistic documentation of this.
We have a question from the audience.
Thank you so much, and I'm glad that I waited until you gave your comment, because I would like to comment on this as well. My name is Olga Mucha, and I'm also affiliated with Museum Territory of Terror in Lviv, but on my day job, I'm strategic analyst and work with media and everything. And I think that our deepest mistake is just thinking that Trump is a victim of disinformation and that he cares, because he doesn't. And disinformation is being seen as a tool in media nowadays, and I think that we all should accept that and probably understand that our team of fact-checkers, after first wave when social media said that, especially Meta, that there are no fact-checkers need anymore, you can fire them all. And then secondly, after the last weak statements of Trump and his team, when they were trying to find any proofs of all those numbers and facts, which were never found, we should accept that he just lies because he can. That's it. And my strong feeling as a person in between of two worlds, media and museum, is that, and I want to refer to Yuliya's words about like what is the mission of museums as a third wave, right? First World War is heroization and memorization. The second is reflection. I have very strong feeling that nowadays, and we should probably also embrace and accept that museums are reality check place. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is where we should find ourselves as a new mission, where we don't know, and there are no internal conflict anymore. Then, yeah, we gather the hard facts. We should disseminate the knowledge as much as possible, and obviously addressing it to children with a basic critical thinking, as it's supposed to be a very survival skill in contemporary days. I would like to hear your comments on this.
Yeah, thank you, Yuliya.
Thank you.
Yeah, you have all chance. I think that we will use this time just for you to answer this comment. Annika, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and I think it was a nice way to put it. I think it's important that museums, when they have trust, and other also organizations that have trust, use it to strengthen democracy. And in Sweden, I think for a long time we talked about being critical of sources, you know, where does this come from, and to be critical. I think that it's equally important to teach not just children, of course, but also adults, what sources to trust. And the trust in sources is maybe even more important than the criticism of them, because doubt is enough. Doubt is so often enough. We look at it when we see about climate change, just doubting that this is a problem is enough to stop action. And if you're not sure who started the war, that doubt might be enough for you not to want to meddle, not to want to put your money there. So having credible actors also using that trust that they have to put messages of truth out there, I think that is even more important to preserve and use than the criticism of all of the false information that is out there.
Thank you, Yuliya.
And I'll only add that when we have conversation about the role of art, for example, in this Czech reality, it's like also the tool to have distance to this reality, to work with this reality, yeah, because when we say about contemporary art, for example, this it's like not tool but practices of practicing the working on abstract and concrete, from concrete to abstract, and to make the skill, to try to train the skill, to deal with different contexts, to have this capacity to check reality and to deal with this. And this is my...
Yeah, we speak a lot about this fact resistance also, and what you are speaking now is about this reality check and this role of doubt, and just how important it is to check this doubt in a way, control this doubt. Niklas, you want to...
I think it's a wonderful analysis. You merging the First World War and Second World War and then the reality check place. I think it's a good wording. I will bring it from here. We've been looking at trust as a kind of currency that you can invest. And if you invest it wrongly, you will lose it, and then the fight will be over. So for the museums, it's quite important to find a balance where we engage, in which questions do we engage, in what way do we engage. And I've been starting to use the word sender trust, not just source criticism or source trust, but sender trust. I think it will be impossible for ordinary people, for me, to be able to be able to understand what kind of sources I can trust and what kind of sources I should distrust. So I will probably turn to different senders, and this sender, I have a trust in this sender, whatever they say, more or less, which is a quite bad thing, but because it divides society into bubbles where we have trust to different senders. But the museums as reality check places is really a good term. So we will be, if we can use this currency in the right way, we can be one of the senders with the highest trust with everyone. Non-polarization places with a high trust.
And to remain trustworthy.
Exactly. And also be aware that we can quite fast lose this trustworthiness.
Thank you. Elisabeth, you have a chance to answer now. I'm sorry that we are taking time, but we started later, so we have this right.
Well, I think I rather build than answer, because I think the topic of evaluating sources, that it's that is a very well identified big struggle. But I think then back to what our museum's role, an enormous challenge is to relate and deal with the expectations of our visitors, what we should talk about, how we should talk about it, and to find a balance where we are not, that we manage to do that in a way that also can transcend a current agenda. Museums are slow, and there is something in that slowness. We can do things fast also, but there is in the slowness there is something that also needs to be protected.
So we need to be slower in this very fast changing world. I agree with you, but thank you very much. And I just want to end this by saying that we started with memories and identities, and then we talked about justice, truth commissions, reality check, and trust in sources, and how all this is involved in this memory and identity issues. And I think that maybe we need one more panel to speak only about justice, because I'm so interested into this, but we didn't have time for this. I'm very sorry. But thank you very much for being with us. It's always very difficult to start, but I think that we did a good job. Thank you. And I have something to you, now, wait. Here, this is, I have instructions. This is for Swedish-speaking guests. And thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And we have yellow ones for Ukrainian-speaking guests. Thank you very much. Thank you. And now we all deserve applause.
Thank you.